As I approached age 30, like many young people, I started seeing a therapist. We talked about times and events that made an impact on my life. One such time was as a very young child, maybe 3 or 4. My mother was often ill and spent days at a time with the curtains drawn and her bedroom door closed. I learned from my older siblings and other caregivers to play quietly, to not disturb her. As the youngest, I didn't have school activities, bicycles to ride, or neighbor friends, so inevitably, I spent time alone with my toys. This was a blessing in disguise because through playing with toys, I learned something valuable. Let me tell you about Tiffany Taylor. Tiffany Taylor was a fashion doll whose gimmick was her hair could change colors. By rotating the back of her head, the hair went from blonde to brunette. She's also different, being 18 inches instead of Barbie's 11 and a half. I was the only one in my family with this doll and recognized that that made her and me unique. She taught me about difference. The Sesame Street playset and its Fisher-Price Little People also taught me about difference. Gordon and Susan were characters who were African American. I had no concept of race yet, but I understood that these toys were brown to all the other white toys. I connected this to an African American woman at our church, one of only a very small number. In my 3-year-old mind, these toys and this lady were different than most I knew. These concepts would combine when I was 7 and received black Tiffany Taylor for Christmas. Exactly the same, except the color of the plastic, not even a different outfit. That was a disappointment. But later, I would write a college paper on race and national identity in international beauty pageants, so it was not a complete lesson lost. I got an A on that paper. Besides difference, my toys taught me about love. As the youngest of 6, I had plenty of hand-me-down stuffed animals. I don't recall any of these bears' names. They weren't my first choice in bears, but I recognized they belonged together. They were both similar and different. They were a family. I eventually got my own teddy bear, and he taught me about love. It's been a generation since Winnie the Pooh had his red felt vest or his yarn mouth. It's been replaced many times by a swipe of permanent marker that has also worn off. He's been restitched and repaired, but is mostly in one piece 40 years later. Pooh was not just a toy or a character in imaginative play. He was a comfort when scared, a support when sad, and a companion when lonely. This teddy bear was my first independent relationship and would empower me to establish the deep, supportive bonds we recognize as family. Pooh taught a young boy that he could create a family bond himself. The bonds with my parents and siblings were mutual bonds, but connections they initiated. This was a dependence on my part. Pooh allowed me to create a bond, to establish a relationship on my terms. So by now you figured out I don't subscribe to the blood is thicker than water idea, that somehow biology is the bond that connects people. Yes, at times, but family is more importantly about love and caring, not DNA. My cousins grew up within 50 miles of each other in Los Angeles, and I grew up in Minnesota. When one cousin attended the college literally across the street from the college I attended, at the same time, I didn't know about it, even though my uncle, his father, picked me up from the airport my first day of school just a few years earlier. Despite having common grandparents, we didn't have a shared experience, since we grew up far away from each other. It is the value placed on having each other in our lives that creates kinship. This played out for me when I was about 20. Like many LGBT youth, my family's reaction to coming out was mixed, from support to indifference to silence. that lasted years. As a college freshman, 2,000 miles from home, before I sent a letter to my parents, I surrounded myself with friends, teachers, and allies whom I felt would support me in the event I was disowned. I was fortunate. Unlike too many LGBT youth who were fully rejected by their families of origin, but this family of choice was vital to having the courage and strength to be my true self. We had a code when we spotted another LGBT person across the college cafeteria or walking across campus. We'd ask, "Is that person family?" Knowing that we might share some common experience with a stranger. Who reminds me that family can come from anywhere. He gives me permission to seek love and support as I need it, from many sources: relatives, neighbors, friends, classmates, coworkers, even all of you here today in this room. Family is not one definition. I knew when I created a family, it would look different. My partner would be a male instead of female, and until very recently, a partner and not a spouse. If we had children, they would be adopted or through a surrogate. We settled for dogs. But we would be a family, both different and the same. As a UU, I believe in the inherent worth and dignity of all families, however they are defined. And my toys went far in teaching me how beautiful that such profound lessons came from Tiffany Taylor, Gordon and Susan, and Winnie the Pooh, whose red felt vest and yarn mouth had to be repaired again and again because I loved him so intensely, and he loved me.